Good morning. I always have to laugh when Jesus asks, have you understood all this? And the disciples say yes. And I want to say, no. No, Jesus, that's a lot, you know? That's a lot. And we've been talking about parables. We started 2 weeks ago the parable of the sower, where God the sower throws the seed, and some lands on the path, and some lands on rocky ground, some lands on thorny ground. And we talked about being deeply rooted in God, that we have to clear out the soil from the rocks out of the soil and the thorns out of the soil, and that we, in fact, as people of God, are supposed to become that good soil, where God's love and grace and mercy are grounded and grow into good fruit in our lives. And then last week we were faced with the conundrum of the weeds and the wheat. The weeds were sown among the wheat, and the farmer said, let's go out and take all the weeds out of the wheat. This is hard. And Jesus says, no, you can't do that. Let them grow together. And at the harvest, they will be separated. And there will be burning of the weeds, and the wheat will be going to the granary. And again, the angels will separate everything, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. And we hear that again. The angels will come again, and they will separate the good from the bad, the good from the evil. And yet today we hear these 5 parables: the mustard seed, the yeast, the hidden treasure, the pearl of great value, and the net. Now, I used to think that these parables, when I preached on them, should be separated. Maybe I should just pick one, because all 5 of them really are a lot to try to handle. But in thinking about it this week, I thought, they're really all connected. Because I'm not like the disciples saying to Jesus, yes, I get it all. It's always a new discovery. But they are connected, and when we think about what each of the attributes are for each of these descriptions of the kingdom, we need to remember that the kingdom of God that Jesus is talking about, the kingdom of heaven, isn't something later. It's something now. Jesus was talking about what God's kingdom is now and in the world. And that was for his followers then, and it is also for his followers now. It's not enough for us to think, well, I can't do anything because the kingdom of God is later. It's after I cross over. We are to try and be about the kingdom of heaven now. So let's consider these 5 attributes. The mustard seed, the smallest of all the seeds. And yet it grows into a gigantic bush, a huge and marvelous bush that becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air can make their nests in them and sing and enjoy this small and tiny seed that grows into something huge. The kingdom of heaven becomes something magnificent. And it can start with one little thing, one tiny little seed, one tiny little effort. At the risk of being trite, we can say a random act of kindness can lead into something more magnificent and marvelous and huge than we ever know. So we're spending a lot of time at home, as I'm sure you are, and watching shows that I haven't seen on TV before. And one is called What Would You Do? Now, this has been around for a while. I don't know if you've seen this show. John Quinones and his crew, it's kind of like Candid Camera. They set up conversations in public places to see what people, innocent bystanders, would do. And there was a recent show that we just saw, probably wasn't recent, but it was recent to me, where this young woman goes up to a table, and she's college age, and she goes up to this table of 2 girls. Now keep in mind, they're all actresses, and she's begging with them to let her join their sorority, because she really wants to be accepted. She wants to be a part of this group, this sorority. And the girls are nasty. They're not nice. They tell her and laugh at her that she is just not going to fit in, that she's not the right kind of person. And you can see from the camera shots the people at the surrounding tables looking at this conversation. Well, then the 2 sorority sisters leave to go to the restroom, and you wait to see what happens. Will the bystanders say anything? And they do. some of them. They go over and they talk to this girl, or because she's crying by this point. And what I haven't told you is this young girl that wants to join the sorority has Down syndrome. And they've said to her, you won't fit in. Don't you understand? I mean, it was so mean. So then these bystanders get involved and tell her, look, you don't want to be a part of this group anyway if they're going to treat you like that. And out from the side comes John Quinones with his camera crew, and all of a sudden the actresses are introduced, and the people who are innocent bystanders are asked questions like, why did you say something? And it's amazing to hear what their responses are. I have a son who's disabled. I have a family member who has Down syndrome. I just didn't think it was right. They were being mean to her. And I thought of that when I was thinking about that one little tiny mustard seed. To that young woman who was trying so hard to be accepted and to be a part of this group, if she were not an actress, and if it were real, I mean, it really was real to the people who got involved, she might have heard what they said and had an experience that was totally different and totally loving and totally accepting because of the way they interacted with her. One tiny little gesture, one extravagant gesture, can make a huge difference in people's lives. We never really know. So then we think about the yeast. And the yeast is similar to the mustard seed. Were it not for the yeast, that little amount that's added to the 3 parts of flour, the bread would not rise. It's the yeast, that tiny little amount, that makes that huge and marvelous difference, whether or not you have bread that rises or bread that's flat. Matzah versus bread. There's a big difference. Kind of like wafers that we have to use right now versus our communion bread. It makes a big difference. Sorry, Jesus, I'm going off track. And then there are the fields. The field that the farmer finds this hidden treasure, or this landowner finds a hidden treasure, and he goes and sells all he has, just like the pearl of great value. The finder goes and sells everything so he can have that one thing. I think we get caught up in the idea that it's about the property or about the wealth or about owning something. You know, I think about our culture and what it would say. Well, the more toys you have, the better, or the greater the house, the better, or the bigger the car, the better. That's not what this parable is about. This parable is about finding something of great value and doing everything you possibly can do so that you can be connected to it. And we know that the greatest and most wonderful thing that God has ever done is to give Jesus to the world. Jesus and his teachings, Jesus and his life, Jesus and his healing and his ministry, and ultimately his death and rising again, because we know that death wasn't the end of the story. And we as Christians feel like that is the most wonderful thing that is ever possibly to be in our lives. Not that we can possess it, but we can strive with all of our hearts and minds and strength to do whatever we can to be in relationship with God who loves us that much. And then finally, the net. This is a hard one for me to think about, because when I imagine the net, I think of this, I mean, we all know what nets look like, right? But the net, the purpose of the net was to be thrown out as far as it could be thrown out and gather all the fish together. Now you'll notice I said throw the net out and gather all the fish together. To me, the net is like a big, huge hug. A big, huge hug for the fish who don't end up getting so much hug as getting sorted out into things. But fish are important for the community to be able to live. But the net really draws people together in the world as opposed to the fish. But when we think about the net, we think about how God's arms are always surrounding us. God's love is always outside of us and inside of us and holding us tightly. So when I think about these 5 examples, I think they all go together. It's the little things that God has done for us and that we do for other people that matter. We may never know how huge that tree grows or how huge that impact is, but it is those things that we do that make a huge difference. It's the way we reprioritize and value what is going on in our lives, the things that we place in high importance, relationships over stuff, community over being isolated, giving away things rather than keeping it all in. And then finally the net, the embrace, the love and the care that we give one another. Someday again we'll be able to hug. This is the hardest thing. But you know, if you think about it, you can always do this. You can put your arms around yourself and give yourself a hug. Or you can find your significant others or the people that you know are safe and give them a hug and they can hug you back. But God's arms are always around us and hugging us. As Paul says in Romans, nothing can ever separate us from the love of God. And we have to believe that and know that God is with us, just like that deer is. If you turn gently and look right there, you will see a deer sticking her head right out of the forest. And on that note, we all say, Amen.
Amen.